start or what?
Do you want to start or should I?
Yeah, you start.
Well, good afternoon. Greetings from ArtsBridge Summer 2022. We are halfway through the program. It's kind of crazy.
COVID, none. It's huge. We're not breathing yet. We are
still kind of holding our breath about the COVID situation, but really everybody's healthy.
Yep, we had one student go to urgent care and it was not COVID, and I did the honors. And then we had another student who thought she needed to go for some physical issue with her foot, but she turns out she didn't need to. So we're rocking and rolling here in Berea, Ohio, and beautiful weather, I have to say too. So are you all hearing good things? That's great.
I'm seeing heads nod. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Sean Ramsey, and this is the one and only Hallie Scheffler here next to me. I'm the vice president at ArtsBridge, and I've been with ArtsBridge since 2016. So maybe some of you have read my bio on the website, but just a little bit of background about me. I come from the college admissions world, so I spent about 13, 14 years in college admissions at 3 different universities, including Boston University and University of Rochester. You've all heard from Ari Strasser and Hannah Uher a lot over the last several months, but they've done an amazing job of putting this program together. Yeah, 126 students are here, and they hit the ground running because of the organization and the planning that went into this over the 50 weeks leading up to it. But my work is really on the college counseling side of ArtsBridge. So in addition to running ArtsBridge Summer and audition workshops and our gap year program, we work privately with students on all aspects of the college admission process in the arts. So I work with music students, with dance students, with actors and musical theater students, visual arts students, painters, sculptors, graphic designers, and fashion designers as well. So yeah, I'll let Hallie tell you a little bit more about sort of the history of ArtsBridge and about her.
Thank you. Thank you. Thrilled to see you all here. A great group. I will start out by saying the kids are fantastic. It's clear everybody was pretty desperate to get out of their bedrooms and do a summer program in person. The energy among the students, the camaraderie, the dorms are terrific. From what I hear, the food is really good. I mean, it's residence hall dorm food. So, and we have a pretty strict boundary here about where students can go. And I know for many of you, that's a concern. You know, will my child wander off and go to downtown Cleveland? No, no, nobody's allowed to really go anywhere. They can go to the Walgreens and maybe they can get frozen yogurt, but that's it. So yeah, health-wise, we've been pretty thrilled with it. Just telling you a little bit about me and the company. My last position, I was Dean of Admissions at Boston Conservatory, and that was 15 years ago. And I saw all these students not getting into college. And I personally was signing their letter. And I know that I knew that this was not going to be a good moment for students when they were denied from college. And then I put a note on the letter, which Sean rejects here at this point. It's like, who's this crazy woman in Boston who's writing this note on the admission letter? But that was me. And I said to the students, if you want to find out why you didn't get in, call. And that's the beginning of what ArtsBridge has become for 15 years. So students, parents, mostly dads, by the way, contact me back then. And families were really kind of devastated because their child would apply to 15 schools and not get in anywhere. And that can't happen. And I can tell you in the 15 years that we've been doing the work we do, it has never happened. And it's not because we do anything that we shouldn't do, but we really have a very, very good sense of what colleges are looking for, what the academics are that colleges are looking for. And in general, like what's the difference between a University of Michigan and a Rider and a Rutgers and Boston University? Like what is, and you as parents and guardians and siblings, you cannot tell from websites, unfortunately. So I started this process with the consulting, and then in 2010, we started ArtsBridge Summer, and we had 20 students. And what I say to everybody, and I lost $18,000, which is, but it's a great lesson here. Just because you lose money doesn't mean you stop doing it, because it was a great idea and it was a big success. It's just that we needed work to do. And then we went to 40 students and 60 students. And right before COVID in 2019, we had 150 students. And then virtually, do you remember how many students we had when we did this virtually?
Oh, Ari and Hannah have those
Yeah.
numbers.
And
But
then
it was big.
it was big, yeah. And now we're back to where we are now. And a couple of our programs are smaller than they've been, but it's kind of been remarkable. Like Art Song's a little smaller. Faculty and students are loving it.
Oh, what are the programs we have here?
Oh,
All the
right.
parents might not know.
All right. So, yeah, and the other program that's a little smaller is Musical Theater 2, which is for students who are rising sophomores or rising juniors. We've actually offered 5 programs this summer. We did fashion design virtually before we started here in Ohio. And here we have Art Song, which is classical voice. We have musical theater for rising seniors only. We have musical theater 2 for younger musical theater students. And we have dramatic acting, which is actually oversubscribed this year. And the students are busy. They are learning so much. And honestly, the faculty have said this to us too, year after year. We have a remarkable group of faculty here. We pay really well. We put them up in hotels. We pay for a lot of socializing, and it's worth every penny because we get to talk about the students and they get to talk to us about the students. And it's really been a, terrific summer. The only issue Sean and I have is because we have about five or six clients who are here. We have many clients who did not get accepted to ArtsBridge Summer because we do not make that decision. The faculty makes a decision. We do believe everybody should get in because they passed the audition. We don't believe that just because you're paying to work with us for consulting, you should get into the summer program. We're very specific on who does well here and what the students need. So we have 8 staff members at ArtsBridge now. Hard to believe, it just used to be me. And everybody is super busy. We have people working in programs and master classes and gap year. We do audition programs. We do a lot of artistic assessments for families. And then Sean and I do the college consulting with the students. And we can tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But what we'd love to do today is help you understand whatever it is that you want to understand. We have PowerPoints, we have speeches, we have talks, and the last thing we want to do is bore you. So I think if I were you, I would use this as ask us anything. And if nobody wants to jump up, then we can start with a few questions. So I'm going to start with a few questions.
Sure,
Sean,
yeah.
Sean, do academics matter? Getting into a BFA or Bachelor of Music? They
do, but it totally depends how much academics matter in academic planning and having a rigorous course load and getting, great grades. It depends on what type of colleges you're looking at. But yes, it matters like in general. Yes.
If you don't go to an arts high school, are you at a disadvantage?
If you don't go to an arts high school? No, definitely not. No. In fact, students at arts high schools who are looking at more selective colleges and, selective colleges being under 30, under 20% acceptance rate, those students, some really selective colleges, I should back up a little bit. So when we're talking about audition or portfolio-based admissions, it's kind of a two-pronged process. Applicants are going through a traditional college admission process to the institution, applying with, an application, essays, recommendation letters, maybe standardized test scores, yada, 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 traditional college application. And then on the artistic side, it's the pre-screens, the headshots, the artistic resumes, all of the artistic piece is a separate application that goes pretty much directly to the faculty in that area, who are the people that proctor auditions and kind of make the artistic admission decisions. So students are kind of going through a parallel admissions process on the institutional side and on the artistic side. And there can often be disagreement, right? Like the arts faculty might be like, this is our top acting applicant this year. And central admissions is saying, yeah, but there's like 2 C's in sophomore year and 3 D's on the record from junior year. So, do you have any other strong actors who are more academically competitive for admission to, let's say, NYU? Which is getting pretty selective, right? Their acceptance rate last year was like 14%. So oftentimes there's like a negotiation internally between the arts admission office and the central admission office, and who wins depends on the situation, depends on the day, depends on the rest of the applicant pool. But yeah, so grades matter. And sometimes a more selective university might be like, no, we don't, that applicant is not going to be able to, succeed through the rigors of the coursework at whatever university that is. But yeah.
So can I ask you more questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are 3 possible degrees for students in the arts, correct?
Yeah.
What are they?
Bachelor of Fine Arts, Bachelor of Music, and Bachelor of Arts. You can do as well. And some schools even have a Bachelor of Science.
Yeah, so we have found, and COVID affected this a little bit, that what we always think is, unless you really know you want to do this major, whether it's music, video game design, fashion, acting, unless you really know that this is what you want, we recommend that students consider BA programs. At a BA program, you can take, it's like what most of us did, correct? Like you can take 4 courses a semester, you can be in part of a musical theater productions or opera if you want, or plays if you want. And then you get to experience what it's like to go to a more traditional college, and you could have roommates who have nothing to do with the arts, and it's for some kids it's a very it's the best way to go to college. We have many students from here who go on to places like Northwestern. I hope, did most of you get the list that we sent out to you about colleges? Yeah, and you can see Northwestern is hugely popular. And by the way, we did have a faculty member from there this week, Melissa Foster, who oversees Northwestern's musical theater program and acting program and all that. Just stupendous. Like, she will be a permanent part of our faculty now. But many students who come here are really exceptional academically, and they want to be in a place like that right outside of Chicago. Great theater in Chicago. They can take many different kinds of classes, be in a beautiful campus. A BFA program, and in some cases Bachelor of Music, is a little bit like going to trade school. And I only say it that way because I just want to emphasize what I mean by that. 75–80% of your classes are going to be in your art. And that means you have room for 1 additional course per semester. So 8 over the life of the degree.
Liberal arts courses.
Liberal arts classes. Can you double major? Sean and I always have a disagreement on this. Sean thinks you can. I think it's tough to do, but you can do a major and a minor. And and then yes, you are around people who cast operas and cast shows and cast musicals and do summer stock and things like that. So you get a certain connection with the industry that you might not get in a traditional BA program. On the other hand, I can tell you there are more and more BA programs in the different arts where you audition. where you can get money if you're doing a specific major in the arts. If you're like, I know University of Delaware, for example, I knew somebody who played the violin and they gave him $15,000 if he agreed to play in the orchestra at University of Delaware. It's like, yes, sign me up. Like those kind of opportunities. So you do not need to go to a BFA or a Bachelor of Music to make it in this profession. It's really important. You all know this. Don't let anybody tell you differently. Are there certain connections that you make? Yes, but your son or daughter can, or however they identify, I should add, can do many things during the summer, can do all kinds of summer stock to kind of get in front of people. And college ends like the beginning of May, by the way. So they have May, June, July, and August to do something else in theater. So I know I have a mom right in front of me on the screen whose daughter is considering, she might do musical theater, but she's also really interested in engineering. And you know who you are. And I think that fascinating. I mean, that's just fascinating. So this student, if she goes the engineering route, can take part in all kinds of opportunities at her college, number one. Okay.
So actually, there's a question that it's fine if you all would like to drop any of your questions in the chat.
Or you can unmute too.
Also invite you to unmute. Yep. But there's a question here. Does academic admissions have more weight than the arts college admission when you apply for a BA versus a BFA?
It depends.
It depends. So most Bachelor of Arts programs, even in artistic majors, like a BA in theater arts or a BA in music, most of those degree programs are not going to have a required artistic component of the admission process. In other words, for most BA programs, you are just applying directly to the institution for not general admission, because you can still apply to the major, but a non-audition based BA theater or BA music major, you won't have to submit the pre-screen. You won't have to do a live audition. You don't have to submit
and that
headshots.
could be a negative, right? Because
it can be
a big part of what the student does.
Yeah,
it's not being considered.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're a high achieving academic student looking at BA programs, then great. You've got plenty of sort of, goods to show in the general admission application. For super, talented students who take the BA route, there's really no chance, to your point, for their art to help them in the admission process or to give them that advantage. It's worth mentioning, though, there are several BA programs, particularly in theater, that do have auditions, either required auditions or optional auditions. A few examples of those schools are like Fordham University,
American
at the Lincoln Center campus for theater, American University, Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. Those at UCLA is a BA program. All of those BA theater programs do have required auditions. Some schools like Muhlenberg College have optional auditions. And when a BA program has an optional audition, we almost always recommend that students do the audition. You get to meet the faculty, you build those relationships. It's a chance for them to, assess potential, and it can help in the admission process. Let me just go back to the question for a moment. When applying for BFAs or Bachelor of Music programs, it's sort of subject to this. There are two admission offices involved in most cases. And the amount of influence, or how much the artistic side weighs in the overall decision, varies very much from school to school, from institution to institution. For example, University of Michigan is, the School of Music, Theater, and Dance there has some of the top acting, musical theater, and classical voice programs in the country, but it's also a flagship public university with really, it's pretty selective, and it's rigorous academics at that school. The pre-screening process that UMich is School of Music, Theater, and Dance follows includes an academic pre-screen. In other words, even though they're looking at, pre-screen recording, songs and monologues or classical repertoire, whatever it is, they're also making sure that before they invite those candidates to campus, that they've got the, good enough grades and a strong enough academic record that when they're inviting them for a live audition, they don't feel like central admissions is going to like automatically reject them, right? So that's an example of a school where the academic standards are really the same for Bachelor of Music and Bachelor of Fine Arts applicants.
Now talk about
what's an example like on the opposite end?
Talk about Northwestern Bachelor of Music. So if somebody doesn't get into so if you apply to Northwestern and you apply to the Beanan School of Music, which is where you would do a Bachelor of Music in voice or violin or flute, and you don't pass the audition, you are not then considered to do a BA at that university, correct?
Right. Yeah, so it negates the overall admission decision.
So we don't like that, by the way. We think that that's kind of not fair. And if somebody's a really great candidate for a school like that, so what we have is we have a number of schools that we suggest often for places where students can apply to more than one degree program, right? So you can apply to the BFA musical theater or the BM in musical theater. And I think somebody has a question about the BM and MT, so we can address that in a second, or in voice. But if you don't get in, you're going to be considered the BA at the university. Syracuse is a really good example of that, by the way. The other thing we love students to be really honest about is what is important to you at a college. And I know some of you are thinking, well, I can't tell my mom and dad that I really, really want to be in a frat or a sorority, but there's some schools that have great programs that have incredible, opportunities for Greek life and have Division I sports. And yes, are they more of a party school? Yes. Don't let anyone tell you they're not. But everybody at college kind of finds their group. And if your child's not a big partier, they will find the non-party group. Not everybody is a partier in college. I know sometimes it feels that way. Some schools have that reputation. But in general, what you want to do with this whole thing, whether to apply to 2 different degree programs, is to really be sure the list is balanced, number one. And that any
What do you mean by balanced?
I mean that there are schools where the college is going to send a limo for the student, right? Like they really want the student, like they want them there. And then schools where it's going to be like an acceptance rate, like Harvard does, like 4%. 5%. So we had a student 2 years ago who was here at ArtsBridge Summer who only wanted to apply to 10 schools. And he said if he didn't get in, he was going to take a gap year. And I said, I need to talk to your mother. Right? My friend Miriam here is like nodding. Yeah. So I need to talk to your mother. And she agreed. That's a whole, gap year.
Oh, but then he had success, right?
He got rejected from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then he got to USC. Yeah, exactly, for a BFA musical theater. But we thought it wasn't going to happen, so we don't recommend doing that. Now we are at a huge advantage when we work with students on the college process, of course, because they're here. And Sean and I have been talking to the faculty every day since they're here, and we know what to ask. And then they do this final audition at the end. I think somebody asked about that question. Want to get that question? Is it the same?
There's so many questions coming in.
Yeah,
I'll just take this one right now, real quick. So the difference between a Bachelor of Music and a BA is similar to the difference between a BFA and a BA. The Bachelor of Fine Arts and Bachelor of Music degrees are what we call the professional degrees, where, like as Hallie mentioned, it's 75 to 80% of the coursework in the major and the remainder in the liberal arts. A BA, or a Bachelor of Science, by contrast, is about, give or take, 1/3 of the coursework in the major, 1/3 of the total credits over 4 years in liberal arts, and then 1/3 open for electives, open for a double major, have a couple minors. In a BA, there's much more flexibility in the curriculum. The BFA and BM degrees are what I would say are like highly prescribed. you kind of know every class you're going to take for 4 years before you even start day one.
Yes.
Hopefully that's clear. Hallie, what question should we take next?
Let's just see. What percentage of ArtsBridge students who want to go to college or musical theater get accepted? It's incredibly high. It's incredibly high. Not everybody here works with us by far. First of all, we don't have that kind of bandwidth, and we definitely do limit how many students we work with a year. We work with about 35 kids a year. That's right,
35 seniors. Yeah.
35 seniors a year, depending on the major. But there's a real variety in BFA programs. If you're saying to me, asking us about Carnegie Mellon in Michigan, that's tough. That's tough. You know, Carnegie Mellon's going to take six people who identify as female, 6 as male a year. Michigan takes a lot more, but Michigan's probably a more well-rounded program than Carnegie Mellon is. I can also tell you that if we have an academically gifted student and they want to go to a place where we don't think the academics are super strong, we'll probably suggest they go to a BA program. It's a place that really values their academics. So let's just talk about this school here for a second, Baldwin Wallace. So Vicky Bussert, there's all kinds of music here, and there's acting and there's musical theater. Specifically for musical theater here, this is a program that you come here to be in this program, to graduate with a manager and pretty much with a manager, and have representation when you graduate. It's not a super strong academic program, right? So we've had clients who've come here and left because they're really kind of academically pretty wonderful, and it just wasn't strong enough. So that's the kind of thing that I want you all to understand about your kids, that if they really want to do that and want to go to a place that will accept all their AP credits, because there are a lot of students who've worked really hard in high school, and if they come to a place where that's nice, but what we really care about is your artistic ability, you need to know that kind of thing. They may not be happy here. On the other hand, they're going to have a manager when they graduate. So it's a little bit of knowing your student and knowing, what's great for them. One thing I will also tell you is there's no one school that everyone needs to go to. When your kids come home, don't let it be like, I have to go to Baldwin Wallace or Carnegie Mellon or I won't make it. It's not true. And the other thing is that, and I went to Sarah Lawrence College. I went to a BA program, and I was a really good flute player for a long time. And my family did not want me to go to a Bachelor of Music program. I probably would be in an orchestra now if I did that, but what I have now is the best job ever, so it worked out. But I can tell you that like what I said before, is you don't need to graduate with a BFA to make it in this profession. Because when a student graduates, they're 21, right, or 22. And if they decide they want to then go to graduate school or move to New York or LA or Chicago and do a lot of auditions and try to make it, whatever that means to them, great. The other question that comes up too is, if my child does a BFA and then decides they want to be a doctor, can they go to medical school? So the answer to that question is, you do not need to go back and do 4 years as a bio major or a chem major. Do you need to go somewhere for a year and 2 summers? Columbia University does this, Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania does this, and make up the sciences, the organics and the inorganics and all that? Yes, but you don't have to go back to school. So for a lot of our families, they feel like, you know what, sweetie, if you want to try to make it in this profession and you want to do it and you want to go to college for 4 years and try to do summer stock during the summer, do it. But so I want you all as parents to know, it doesn't mean that if they get to the end and they realize that this really isn't for me, that they're stuck. And that's super important, right?
Yeah,
so other
definitely.
questions?
There's lots of questions about test optional.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about standardized testing for a moment. When the pandemic began, test sites were canceled. And as a result of students not being able to take SATs and ACTs, colleges, including all the most selective schools and popular colleges in the country, all went test optional. Almost 3 years later, a couple of schools have brought those back, like notoriously Georgetown University, MIT are now testing required, but the vast majority of the colleges that adopted test optional policies remain test optional. For those of you that this is brand new for, Test optional means that the college will consider applicants who apply with an SAT or ACT score, but they will equally consider applicants who either didn't take those tests at all or took those tests and are choosing not to include the scores with their application. And it's tricky. Unfortunately, I think the intention, the intention was to increase, obviously to make it possible for students to apply, but to increase inclusivity, diversity, and colleges have done a decent job, I think, of reassuring applicants that consideration is truly equal if you don't include test scores. The data, now that we have a couple of years worth of it, tells a little bit of a different story. And that difference is that applicants with great test scores are admitted at higher rates than strong applicants without test scores.
How do you decide of our clients who should submit their score and who shouldn't?
So it's a really good question. And what I say to pretty much all the students I work with is no matter what score you have on the SAT or ACT, with a balanced list, like Hallie was talking about, there are some aspirational kind of stretch schools, some target schools, some likely schools. No matter what the mix of schools is on a student's list, it's pretty likely that scores might be included with some and excluded from others. And when we're making the decision about where to send them and where not to, the first thing that we look at is what's the middle 50% of the range that this college typically admits. That's widely available online. You can Google the name of Boston University SAT range, and you'll get that data. So as a general rule, I say if your score is at the 50% mark, at the average or higher, it's generally a good idea to include those scores. If you're at the 25th percentile, like the bottom of that middle 50% range or lower, usually opt out. And then there's like this gray area in the middle, where then we kind of go in a little bit deeper and say, okay, relative to your transcript, to your academic record, does this test score enhance your academic profile or does it bring it down? So for example, a student who's taken 7 AP classes and a few honors classes and has a 3.8 GPA, but got an 1100 on the SAT, that SAT score does not enhance the academic profile of this candidate.
Right.
Even if it's at a college where that score is on the upper end of the range, it's not helping the application, right?
Right.
But it depends on the school and context. If it's a somewhat weaker academic student, maybe like a more of like a 3.0 student with not a lot of rigorous coursework, like standard college prep coursework, but they get like a 1560 on the SAT.
Out of what?
Out of 1600, that can paint a totally different picture. So when colleges are assessing applicants academically, they're looking at how many years in each of the 5 core academic subjects did the student take: math, science, English, world language, and social studies. So quantity, then quality. How rigorous was this curriculum that the student opted for? If you're a brilliant kid and you go to a high school that offers tons of AP classes and you have a 4.0 GPA, but you've taken none of those AP classes, and then you get the 1560 on the SAT, a selective college is going to be like, this student could have challenged themselves more by taking those tougher classes in high school. I'm just going to, to be blunt, the college would be like, this looks on paper like a lazy student who's really smart but didn't challenge themselves.
Right.
That's not great, right? So we want to be encouraging students to take the most demanding coursework relative to what they can manage. And that's really critical, because no student should be put in a situation where they're taking tougher coursework than they can succeed in and feel good about the learning and feel like they're succeeding as a student. So that has to come first, obviously. But once that is met, we should be saying, like, take the toughest course load that you can achieve
Mhm.
if you have your heart set on some of these more selective schools.
Mhm.
There's another question in here on the topic of standardized. So standardized testing, test optional is one way to apply. There are, like I mentioned, a few schools that do require tests. And then there are some colleges that are test blind or score free or test free, which means that even if you have the College Board send that SAT result to that college, they will not look at it. It is not going to be factored in the application. Famously, the entire University of California system, like 2 years ago,
Totally done away with it.
is now test
Yeah.
blind.
Let me just jump here with a question here. Thank you, Claudia, for answering that Northwestern question. It's kind of half right, half not. Northwestern is trying to not do any loans, but Northwestern has a lot of money as a school, so they do. I don't know if they quite meet need yet, but they try to come close. There are scholarships in the music school, right? So if you play bassoon or double bass or oboe, for sure, because these students audition. In theater, right now, the students don't audition, but we heard from Melissa Foster, who I mentioned before, who oversees voice for the theater majors, they might be considering an audition, which would be really interesting, because the way it works now for theater at Northwestern is until the student arrives and walks on campus, they don't do any kind of an audition to be in like the musical theater certificate program. And there are a lot of students who want that because you get whatever, you know what I mean? You get lessons that goes along with that. So, but I have found out too that even if you're not part of that group, you still can take part of a lot of options at the school. There's another question here about, is there a safety for a BFA acting? It's a very good question, but it's a tough question to answer. In general, for audition programs, I don't think we would ever say anything is likely or safe, because we don't know what the student's going to do when they walk into the room or when they walk into the Zoom room, right? Somebody could be sick, somebody could forget all the text in their monologue or in their aria, they forget what they're doing, and they probably won't get it. Right, that kind of thing. It depends on the students. There are some students who want to go to a BFA acting or MT no matter where it is, but we work with a population that is largely like they want to go to a school in a certain area, right? They want to be in the Northeast, or they want to be in Chicago, or they want to be in California. So it depends. I mean, not everybody's willing to go down south. Some of those schools down there are a little bit easier to get into, even though coastal Carolina and South Carolina is definitely more competitive than it used to be. I can also tell you another interesting thing about money is sometimes don't only apply to state universities because it's less expensive, because some of the other schools do meet need. Now, NYU right now is close to $90,000 a year, and we will come out right now and say to you, do we think you need to pay that amount of money? And we will say no, right?
Well, you always say follow the money.
I say follow the money, right? If your child gets money, follow the money, right? Don't feel like you have to go to NYU. As a New Yorker myself, who grew up on Bleecker Street, right next to NYU, I can tell you a lot of people just want to be in New York and go to Washington Square Park and go to Broadway and see shows, right? But you know what? These students have a long life, hopefully, right? And you don't need to do that. There are other schools that really, NYU is famous for giving very little money, by the way. Boston University meets need now, so they say, but what you have to dig into, does that mean loans? You don't want $60,000 in loans for your student, right? So there are just based on families we work with, there are some families who say we only want to apply to colleges that meet need. We only want to apply to students that will give merit scholarship. We only want to apply to colleges that whatever amount my student gets, they will get that for all 4 years. By the way, there's some schools that won't guarantee that. So that's the extra kind of value added in whether working with us or working with anybody who really understands the climate out there. I really don't believe that somebody should have to mortgage their house for their child to go to college. One of the things I love with the UC system is that the community college system is very different there than, let's say, it is in Boston, where Sean and I live, right? So, you know, it used to be like community college, oh, is that good? Or does that mean something bad? But in the UCs, after you go for 2 years, you're guaranteed a spot in one of the UCs if you go to community college. So that's kind of a good deal. So what's next?
Yeah, I'll take it from here. Just to kind of finish talking about, someone brought up that selective colleges have basically been breaking both application records and low acceptance rates. And yes, this is true. Cutthroat admissions has become way more cutthroat, partly because of test optional admissions, and applicants who may have self-selected out of a particular college's applicant pool are now like, hey, I've got a great GPA. I've got great recommendations. I'm going to apply to Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Stanford and, Cornell. And as a result of applicant pools just being bigger, most colleges are still enrolling the same number of freshmen, but from a bigger pool, it's simply a lower acceptance rate. But you got to keep in mind, and this is something that I emphasize with, especially with high achieving academic students that I work with. If you look at, the Ivy League schools, for example, yeah, they've got 3.5%, 4 or 5% acceptance rates nowadays, but probably 60 or 70% of the applicants in the pool look similar, right? Really great grades, tons of rigor, great extracurriculars, community service, artistically involved, and all the rest. So we call these schools, it's a bit gross, but we call them lottery schools or highly rejective schools. And a lot of times, so we make an academic indication of likelihood of admission, both on the academic side and on the artistic side. And these highly rejective or lottery schools are high stretch schools for literally every single applicant that applies to them, no matter how stellar a student may be. It's a statistical improbability that any person is going to be admitted to schools with an acceptance rate.
It's like winning the $1 billion lottery that's going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, it's not quite that hard, but it feels that way to a lot of students and to parents who, maybe attended some of these highly, for example, I attended University of Rochester and I was accepted to BU 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago when I applied. I wouldn't have been admitted to these colleges today with the academics that I had when I was graduating high school in '99. But it's a tough thing to hear that despite all of the fantastic achievements and work that your students are doing, that a school that accepts 7% it's really unlikely to happen.
But 80% of the colleges out there want your students. You are all applying to the same schools. You need to spread it out. You need to look at other schools. The question came back about the performing arts high school. So I went to LaGuardia in New York, and we have a lot of kids here from LaGuardia this year, and a lot of kids from Pittsburgh and from Rochester and from Texas, I think from Houston Performing and Visual Arts School. In terms of is it an advantage or not, it's an interesting question. You guys have great questions, because sometimes the students in those schools think, especially the New Yorkers, they think that I got this, I'm a New Yorker, like we're the best of the best. This is the best city in the world. Academics don't matter so much. And on top of that, LaGuardia has definitely been having some challenges with not having enough class time in the day or not offering enough AP. So the kids sometimes can be at a disadvantage. So there are, interestingly enough, a lot of the parochial schools out there are incredible. The students are incredible and they have a lot of arts, and those students do well. So that what Sean said is taking as many of these challenging classes as possible, and know when you go into the audition, you may be the best in your school, but you are competing against everybody else who's the best, which is why it is fantastic the students are here. They are making really brilliant contacts. What we're going to tell them, and we're going to be in touch, is every one of these faculty has said to us, the students need to let us know when they are coming to audition, right? We need to drum that into them because, and they need to schedule their auditions early, not wait till the last minute, all that kind of thing. But the faculty is really on their side. Like, we don't have any duds here this year. We don't. And by that, I know that's not the nicest word in the world, but I think the students who are here who decide not to do a pre-professional program are doing that totally on their own, not because anybody would tell them.
And actually, that's a huge success. I mean, sometimes
Right?
students come to an intensive program like this and realize
It's not for them.
oh, this, this thing that I've done for fun forever, like when you're in the intensity of a curriculum, working 12 hours a day on the craft, they might realize, you know what, I want this to be a minor. I don't want it to be front and center or to take up the bulk of my college experience. And that's great.
What they love about being here is they love being with people who are like them. Right? They love being with their peeps. I've heard a bunch from kids who are at high schools that they don't really quite feel like they fit in, but they do their arts outside of school. And that's like the best Saturdays are like their best day ever, right?
Yeah. I want to like keep talking about this. You guys are asking fantastic questions. So, for example, when I was in admissions in the College of Fine Arts at Boston University, I would fight every year. There was always a set of applicants, the top flute applicant, the top classical voice applicant, who didn't quite have the grades. And I was the one sort of fighting with the central admission office. Interlochen would come up every year because we'd have fantastically talented applicants from Interlochen that BU central admission. And by the way, this was like, I left BU in 2016. Back in those days, the acceptance rate at BU was like 35%. When I started there in 2009, it was 52%. So it's kind of come down every year. But it's important, I think, for students and parents to realize, I'm going off on a tangent, but I'll come back. It's important for students and parents to realize that colleges have priorities that aren't, yes, students are a priority, applicants are a priority, but they're also trying to compete with peer institutions and climb up the US News and World Report. And you've probably all heard the story that US News has excluded Columbia University from the 2022 rankings because some professor like fabricated some of the data. And so they're off of the ranked list. But, a school like Boston University, where I worked and loved, back in, 10 years ago, in a single application cycle, they increased their applications by 10%, by 10,000 applicants just because of reducing one requirement for all applicants. So boom, application numbers goes up, acceptance rates goes down, and that selectivity index equals climbing up the college ranked lists.
Great. There's a couple questions here because we're limited. I almost feel like we should do another one of these. Our students are so busy with their art. How important are other activities? So one of the reasons many, many schools became test optional before COVID is colleges know this, that your kids are not spending time in SAT and ACT class. They're in rehearsals. They're doing their lessons. They're doing all that. So in general, the students need to be able to walk in the room and be as competitive as they can and be as great as they can. Probably some leadership is still a good idea. Many high schools have that as a priority, but it doesn't need to be necessarily at the top of the list. Unified. I'm going to start talking really fast now because we have to wrap up soon. Unified auditions. It used to be in the old days that you should only go to the college to audition, right? And then COVID happened. So virtual auditions are here to stay, by the way. And anybody who doesn't know Unified, I will touch on what that is in a second. So if you or your family, it's very expensive to fly around the country, by the way. And especially if you're going to New York or Boston, well, like New York, $400 or $500 a night at some places to stay, unless you try to do an Airbnb, but it's completely acceptable. You do not have to worry anymore that your child will get less than the best consideration. Unified auditions right now, they are only for theater. They go to 3 different cities: New York, end of January, Chicago, the first week of February, and then after that first week, like 7th, 8th, and 9th, or 7th and 8th, they go to Los Angeles. The word on the street is the weakest students have been going to Los Angeles, but I think it's because the faculty's tired. Our recommendation, Chicago is a really great place to go. The students can do 2 or 3 auditions there a day. They're going to see all their ArtsBridge friends if they go here or New York. I just think Chicago, the whole setup is a little easier.
Also, more schools go to Chicago than
any other
than
schools.
New York or LA.
And it's also pretty much in one place. I mean, they use a couple of hotels, but in New York, it really is kind of all over the place. So that's called the Unified Theater Auditions. If anybody Googles that, you will be taken to a page and you might only see 20 schools. It's extremely misleading. And I've tried to take this on, but I haven't been successful. Just because you see 20 schools, it does not mean there are only 20 schools who go there. There are about 150 colleges that go, let's say, to Chicago. So what you want to do is look up the dates for the unified auditions. And then when you go on the college page, or if you work with us, we have an online college guide that our families use and they love it. And we have everything there. We will tell you what dates are the unified dates. So just know that you do not have to run all over the country, and it is just as strong. I just want to answer the Juilliard question.
Great.
3 years ago, we had 3 kids who got into Juilliard for acting. It was kind of remarkable.
Out of how many? Because they only take, I think, 12 freshmen each year.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah.
It was nuts. They were from our acting program, which is just fantastic. So yes, if the student is of the level, yes, they should audition. But if I'm not a huge proponent of, I'm just going to audition, see if I get in, because rejection's hard. Rejection is really hard. And if you start applying to 20, 25, 30 schools, we don't condone that at all.
So what is the right number? How many schools should students apply to?
I would say 12 to 15. What do you think?
10 years ago, I would have said 7 to 10,
Yeah.
but the numbers crept up partly because, especially for students like I keep talking about, who are interested in the more popular colleges, the acceptance rates are low. But I think 15 for like acting and MT is pretty common now.
Every
Yeah.
single student here is going to get a final report. We are known for that. A lot of other programs do not do this. They are long.
Hallie, what's the best way to narrow a list? Let's say you're starting with, you've got 40 schools you're interested in. How do you whittle it down? How do you help a student through that process?
Oh, that's a good question. So location, where do you want to be? Some students want to be where there's an airport.
So think about what you want.
Think about what you want. Think about, okay, so let's just talk about Berea, Ohio for a second, where we are. Now, we're city people. So this is a small town here. There's a lot of Wendy's and Burger King. We found a Panera. That's good. But if you want to do other things, you probably have to go into Cleveland, which is not that far. But, especially with COVID, I don't know how much they're even letting students. Oh, I think they have to let students off campus if they're over 18, right?
College students?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're adults. Yeah.
Who is teaching there? So this is also, I'm talking also to my parents out there of students we're working with. There's so much change going on right now. The head of NYU is going to Michigan. The head of, I think is it Columbia College, is going to Carnegie Mellon. There is so much change. So you want to look at who the faculty is. You also want to go on YouTube and you want to listen to the students and do a virtual tour and see what the campus is like and find out what the outcomes are. Are students getting into opera companies? Are they getting into professional programs at the grad level? What's the attrition rate? There's some schools right now that are really kind of hemorrhaging students because there's a lot of things going on at college, as you can imagine, social justice issues. And sometimes it's, most of the time it's super important, but sometimes it can really dominate the student's experience. And then also find somebody you really trust to be honest with you. Like, we are brutally honest. Like, we're nice, but we're honest. And if somebody says to me, right?
You're more brutal, I'm more nice. But
Miriam's like, yeah. I'm really honest because, as a mom of two grown boys, I can tell you it's just like, I hate all the rejection. The kids, it's really hard for them. And they start thinking, I'll never get in anywhere. I suck. This isn't for me. And, a great story I tell, about 4 years ago, I had a student who got, I want to talk to you guys about so much, that you can apply to college 3 different ways.
We can run over a few minutes.
Okay.
We can
If
keep
you
going.
have to go, you can go, but early action, early decision, and regular decision.
That's a question that came up. So what is early decision?
Okay.
I'll take it.
You take it.
So the question of application
Did you say you were
timeline.
nicer?
I think I
You
did.
probably are nicer.
That was rude. Application timelines for seniors. So regular decision is sort of standard. A lot of colleges, regular decision application deadlines are like January 1,
No,
February.
not
Yes.
for the arts.
Oh, I'm not done.
Oh.
That's regular decision. Early action and early decision are very different from each other, but they tend to have November 1 deadlines at most colleges that offer early decision and early action. So what's the difference between these two? Early action means that you apply by November 1st, you get an admission decision one way or the other by mid-December, typically. Some schools will do it in January, but you still have until the college decision day of May 1 of the senior year to make your decision about where to enroll. So that's early action. You apply early, find out early, but you've got time to make your decision. Early decision is binding. So you apply to one school early decision by November 1st. And if they admit you in December, you're going. Your high school is can't send any more transcripts out to other colleges. You've signed an agreement saying you'll withdraw any other applications you've submitted. It's a binding commitment. And then of course,
and what we don't recommend students apply early decision if financial aid is important, by the way. The schools say the financial aid is the same, and we're not so sure. So financial aid is not an issue for you. Early decision is great. Your child wants to go to NYU, wants to go to BU. Great doing that. But if you're waiting for a decent package, you probably want to do regular decision. Right?
And really that's financial aid is kind of the one way out of a binding early decision agreement. Like if you are in a high financial need situation and your child applies early decision, like Hallie said, most colleges will say, the financial aid package that you could expect regular decision, you can also expect early decision. It doesn't always work out that way, but work with the college financial aid office and feel free, I would say, to anybody for whom financial aid is a big factor in this decision, reach out to the college financial aid office. There are people you can get on the phone and ask all of your questions to. Find out at that particular college what GPA you might need to have to be eligible for scholarships. People don't take enough advantage of reaching out to the college professionals directly. Anything else about time? Oh, chat.
Yeah, good. Let's see. Does ArtsBridge for ED? What if they cannot meet financial need, and who decides what your need is? Oh, that's another great question.
Wait, before we do that one though, because you said but not for the arts. So let's talk about timelines in the fall for arts applicants like Baldwin Wallace and Elon, where you have to be so early.
So Baldwin Wallace students are applying right now, August, right? There's no pre-screen here. It's a pretty easy application. So your kids don't need to freak out, but there are 2 early action dates, non-binding, that often students wanted. They're going to do one virtually, and I think 2 in November. But if you want one of those, you should apply soon for sure. Even though the final application may not be due till December 1, there's something called a pre-screen. Many schools offer this. So we, there are probably it's probably possible for those of you not working with us to Google, theater, voice, music programs that require a pre-screen, or you can go on the individual school's website. But pre-screen students, except students start sending those in the beginning of September. And what a pre-screen is there are specific requirements that they want, maybe one-on-one monologue, maybe 3 art songs in 3 different languages, English, Italian, and French, or English, Italian, and German, monologues, contrasting. Everything's contrasting that everybody wants. And then if you pass that, and 95% of our students pass pre-screens here, so that's good for you to know. They should be decent, that you do not need to rent out a recording studio. The iPhone camera is fantastic. You just want to make sure if there's a pianist playing that the balance is good. And then once a student does that and gets an answer back, then they can schedule their audition, right? Some schools require the full application is in, right, Sean, for the pre-screen?
Before they'll give a pre-screen
Would you say
decision.
most do or most don't?
I would say most do, but there are a few that don't, like Syracuse.
Syracuse University,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't have to do that.
Where they'll give you a pre-screen decision, and actually, like, the faculty there will be like, hey, get your pre-screen decision before you go through jump over all the hurdles of submitting an institutional application.
So we are very committed to the students here and the families here. We, can't work with everybody, as I told you before, but what we want to be for all of you is a resource. So do you want to put in our
I will.
email and stuff? So, so this is what I'm going to say. If there are individual questions that come up, definitely email us. If you're going to write to us and say, what do you think of a song from the Fantastics for my child's musical theater audition? If I don't know, I'm going to ask one of the faculty members for you. Okay. And the other thing is your students can use the faculty as a resource. They can write to them. Like I said before, they need to know when your child is auditioning. So that's super important. If we do discount our services for anybody's interested, and I want you to know that if you want to speak with us about what we do, I'm not pushing that at all, because fortunately we have great families we work with already. Just email one of us and we'll set up a time and talk to you. Right? Because what you should do probably is let's wait till the program's over. If you find any time on my calendar for next week, you can grab it. It's going to be tight, but definitely grab it. And then we don't go on vacation afterwards, right? We're around. We take a couple days off. I drove here from Boston, so I'll be 9 hours in the car. Actually, you can call me in the car.
Yeah, you've got plenty of time.
Yeah.
I would say since the pandemic, any stigma or disadvantage has completely disappeared in terms of, is a virtual audition as good as an in-person audition? It is now totally equal. The difference though, and this gets back to the point about how does a student who's interested in 30 or 50 schools narrow the list down to 15? Doing a couple of, if you can't, there's no replacement. There's nothing as good as physically being on a college campus. And for any student or family who's like starting this process and you don't even know like, where would we visit? I often recommend seeing, 2 or 3 schools that are contrasting
Big
from each
state
other.
university.
See a big flagship public university. See a small liberal arts college that has a great BA program. See a private university that has like a conservatory within the university, like an NYU or a
Boston University,
Chapman University, or Boston University, and maybe a conservatory, like a standalone conservatory. It could be Cal Arts, or it could be Columbia College Chicago, or Boston Conservatory Juilliard. So just seeing enough variety in a few visits to have a reaction so that your child can kind of get opinionated about like, okay, I like this kind of campus, I don't really love this, or I love an urban setting, or I love more of a, suburban or rural setting. That's a great way to start.
I just want to call out Drew here, who said something really great. That we want to empower our kids, right? And we don't want it to be that they are like afraid and nervous, like, are they going to like me? The students the students are really good. These students are really great. And anybody who knows me knows that me, especially, I never say that. And I would be super honest with any of you if you wanted to talk to me. But you know what? The students, you're all consumers here, right? And if anybody is ever not nice or jerky or anything, you don't want to go to that school. And your child needs to really feel like they can look around and feel, do the people look like what they want? And housing like and all that. What I would say a little bit different than Sean is more and more and more, I'm finding that students can do a virtual tour and a virtual info session and get credit for, being what we call demonstrated interest. Then when your son or daughter gets into the college, then you go visit. Because I guarantee you, most of these schools, they're going to love it. They're beautiful. It's like a country club here, right? I mean, there's everything here. There's a gym and a weight room, and it's probably a sauna somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Is there a pool?
And talking to students.
Yeah.
If you're interested in being connected, we know students at, all these schools. So we're constantly putting students in touch with current college students at schools that they're interested in. And that what's great about that is you're not getting the sales pitch from the admissions office, because those sessions, as you may have noticed, can feel kind of generic after a while, and all these schools blur together because they're saying the same spiels about their academics and their performance opportunities.
When I left Boston Conservatory, one of my the first feeling I had was, oh, I don't have to just like sell this school anymore.
Yeah.
Like I could direct people where we thought they should go.
Well, that's what's great about.
Yeah.
the work we
Anyway,
get to do.
was this good? Was this helpful? Great. I don't know if we have any time to do it again, but we can do this when we get back also. So why don't we just, stay in touch. Anybody who wants to speak to us about anything, please write to us. And we are really excited to have one more week, and let's keep our fingers crossed for no COVID.
No COVID.
Thank
you so much for coming.
Can you please say what your email addresses are? Because
Yes, I put them in the chat, but I'll spell them here. So
Okay, great.
Hallie's email, Hallie is Halley.
That's not my email though.
That's just her name.
Right.
Her email address is hsheffler, HSHEFLER @artsbridge.com. And mine is S for Sean, Ramsey, RAMSAY @artsbridge.com.
And if anybody forgets it, you can write to info@artsbridge.com and it'll be forwarded back to us.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.